Good afternoon and welcome to the session on AI tools that every job seekers need. Today I'm joined by my colleagues Dean and Chris, who have some great tips to share on using AI in job search, whether it's through brand creation, in your CV, in your interview, or just in research in general. There are some incredibly helpful tips out there to use with the different tools. And I just want to caveat before we go into it that we don't favour any particular application. We will talk about the Microsoft versus the Google, the Chat GPT and the Copilot alike. So you use whatever is your application of choice, and we aren't favouring anyone. So, Dean, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Dean Jamson. I am a career coach, executive coach, facilitator of various different leadership stuff. I use the technical term, delighted to be on the guest seat for a change.
Yeah, no, it's good to have you. Thank you. And Chris.
Yeah, hi, and just like Dean, I mean, I'm a career and executive coach and a facilitator, and yeah, I mean, I've been helping people through change and transition for many years now, and we're obviously really excited to be here, especially talking about AI. It feels like my technology background is sort of coming full circle with it.
Perfect, thank you. So we'll kick off with the first question, which is, what are some of the ways AI can help you find your next role? So, Dean, do you want to start with that one?
It's such a broad question, isn't it? In simple terms, lots of ways. I think it's probably more about being really, really clear on what it is you want AI to do, having that sort of real clarity of what am I actually asking it to do, because there are lots of applications in terms of, as you said at the top, Alison, in terms of, whether I'm using Copilot or ChatGPT or any other flavor of AI. There are, whether it's helping with the application, whether it's finding the job opportunity, whether it's fine tuning an assessment, it can be used all the time throughout the recruitment process. But I think for me, one of the things I'm really, really passionate about saying to my coachees is don't just rely on it, in the same way as you wouldn't rely on just the spell checker in Word. You would have cast your own eyes over it. And I think it's really important that in some of the webinars we do at 1080, we talk about the future of the workplace is about people plus AI as a partner, as a collaborator. So I see it very much as, how can I collaborate with AI? How can I use it for my best advantage, and using it as a tool, but not the only tool available to help you find your next role.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important point, because it doesn't replace everything that you would have normally done. I think it's an addition, isn't it? I've run workshops where people say, oh, well, I'll just write my CV in AI. And I think, well, actually you can, but the downside is there is also software out there that can tell whether you've written your CV in AI. So, just be mindful of what you use it for.
Well, I think the thing with that about the authenticity for me is, if I've written my CV using AI and then I land an interview and I go for the interview, it may become really, really obvious that the person talking isn't the person that wrote the CV. Right. And so therefore there's a disconnect that you could find people think, well, they start to subconsciously question whether or not this is did you actually write your own CV? Do you know what's in it? So I think it's really, really important that however you use AI, you make sure that you maintain control.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Chris, jump in.
Yeah, so I mean, just speaking to specifically, how can AI help you find the next role? So one of the exercises that I've done with clients that they're wanting to make a career transition and they're not entirely sure what that looks like is we've used the AI to analyze their specific skills and experiences and suggest, the part of the key is giving it the right amount of context. So giving it quite a lot of detail about what are the skills and experiences, what are you looking to do? What sort of organizations would you like to work for? And asking it to analyze that and put it into like a table format. So say, here are the key skills that you need. Here are some of the potential roles. Here are some of the ways that you might transition into that role. It can also be really great in helping you to get a handle on, like, let's say I wanted to transition into a different sector. Well, give me some background research on that sector. What are some of the key trends or industry developments that are happening in that sector? And how might my skills best be valuable in that space? And also thinking about, like, if I was going to transition from, say, a public sector into a private sector, because many of our clients are in that position, asking it to analyze, how well positioned am I to move into the private sector? What are my transferable skills? Which ones are most valuable? But I think even another great prompt I use with people a lot is just asking it to be an expert career coach. Here's my scenario. Here's what I'm looking for. What are the potential mistakes that I might make along the way to achieving my dream role? What are some of the things I need to look out for? So it can really help to fill in a lot of those gaps and spark some ideas and even come up with job titles that you may never have even thought of.
Absolutely. I think it depends on the prompts as well, doesn't it, what you put into it? So what are you asking it? What skills do I need? Do I need to upskill? Why does it matter? You can almost have a conversation with it and say, well, what's really important? What's out there in terms of the the industry research around skills? And often I used it the other day, and it came up with the World Economic Forum and also the LinkedIn skills for 2025, and it told us what hiring companies are looking for. So yeah, really helpful.
And I think that's really good information, especially for people that are struggling to really understand what skills they have that are transferable. I think it's really great at highlighting those and helping you to also really get across how those skills are going to be useful in a different space. So yeah, I think it's good at uncovering the blind spots, I think, is what I would say.
Yeah, and broadening perspective, because I think, if you've been in a company for a long time, you only think in that space, and like you think, oh, actually, it is transferable, like you say, whether it's public sector, private sector, etc. Okay, we're going to go on and talk about some examples that you have used. You've mentioned a couple there, Chris, but what sorts of things can you give some examples of where you've used AI to help your clients? You've mentioned a couple already.
Yeah, so a couple of specific ways that I find that I do with almost most of the clients at the moment is, firstly, because a lot of them struggle with the CV, let's be honest. So helping them to capture their skills and achievements, put it into, what we call an achievement-based scenario as opposed to a job description scenario, because that's something that some people really do find quite difficult. And once we've got that, what I like to do is to take the CV, anonymize it, of course, we pull out all the personal details, and put that alongside some job descriptions for the roles I want to go for, and ask the AI to do an analysis of how well positioned they would be to get an interview. How well would they, come across to the employer with the skills they have? And I have to say, the analysis that comes back is very enlightening. And then, of course, we can use that to help us to refine the CV. Then we might take that into the LinkedIn profile, fleshing out that about section, adding some key skills and achievements there. And then another way that I'm finding most recently is that once we've got that is in an interview situation. Again, I've got my CV. Here's the role I'm interviewing for. What could be the most likely competency-based questions that might emerge in that interview? And based on my background, what might be some potential examples or scenarios? How might I structure those answers? And something I've been finding really useful, if people are happy to do it, is to record the session and then go through the interview, giving their answers in that STAR format we teach, situation, task, action, result. Because then not only do you get a video output, so you can watch yourself, which is actually very good, but you get a transcript, and being able to see how you have responded to an answer in the interview, it makes it a lot easier for them to go back and understand how they can really get that down to the bare bones basics, because we all have a tendency to ramble sometimes. So helping people to see what they've said and then getting that down to the most clear, concise answer possible is great. And those are just two of the main ways I'm using it at the moment. But I guess I'm sure Dean's got some other ones that he's been going to pull out of his sleeve there.
Just to pick up on one point you mentioned there, Chris, which I think is a top tip, is that if you are putting your CV in, please take off your personal information, because everything you put onto AI is retained.
It's in there, correct? Yeah.
And so just make sure that you depersonalize it. Everything else is fine, but information, names, addresses, phone numbers, etc., take off. But Dean, give us your.
I'll pull a few out of my sleeve, as Chris says. I think the point Chris made about blind spots is a really, really good one. I've used it a few times recently where we've, similar to what Chris has done, where you've got the anonymized CV and you've got the job description, but then very specifically said to the AI that I was using, what's their percentage fit for this role? So you've got a very, really clear score. Now, I know that can be quite subjective. Now, what I did with one coachee was I analysed their CV and the job description. Then I asked two different AIs to do it. And actually, I came up with a couple of things that AI didn't. So I was really pleased about that. Ego stroked a little bit there. And both of the AIs came up with things that I hadn't thought of. And not necessarily the same as each other. So therefore, between almost like the triad of research partners, we're able to really then bring that through to, right, how do we now use this? How do we use this information? Which was really, really powerful. And we got the person up to a 95% fit.
Wow.
Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get the job, because there's a lot of heavy lifting to do around interview and everything. The other thing I've done quite recently in a webinar actually is I thought I really need to demonstrate the power of AI. So I put my own neck on the line a little bit, and I asked AI, would you employ Dean Jamson, coach, as a non-executive director for learning development? And of course, what AI then does is it's pulling all of its known data from, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, articles online, lots of things. And it, really gave me some great insights that if I was looking to do that, and the blind spots that Chris mentioned, it gave me a couple, which I thought, I hadn't really thought about that. So it gives me an opportunity to get the perception. I often talk in leadership terms about, what's your intention? What's the perception of others? So it gave that sort of, if you like, Johari window blind spot of seeing the undiscovered things that, or the hidden bits that other people might see that I don't. So it gives you a really good opportunity to do something about it. The other thing I've done recently with somebody, they had to do a written assessment for a role, and they wrote it out, typed it all up, and we asked AI to assess the quality of their submission. But in doing so, AI is really, really quick to want to rewrite it. And this was that word of caution that I said earlier we used, because we took what AI had written, just to get some points, but then my challenge to the coachee was, now rewrite it still using your language, but try and include those points so that it's still very much in control of the response, but you've almost, as Chris was saying, used AI as the research partner. My final one, got one up my other sleeve, is where Chris was saying about, career pivot or, transferable skills. There are tools now within, say, LinkedIn, for example, where in the job search function, you can, you might say, one example I saw was The person said, I'm really creative, got a good attention to detail. What jobs in the gaming industry would work for me? And then LinkedIn is sort of bypassing its normal routine of looking for a coder or looking for a financial advisor or whatever space they're currently in. And it's starting to suggest job roles that fit to those strengths. So to go with what Chris is saying, complementing it really well, is if you can identify what your strengths are, things that really give you energy and enjoyment, and that you've got a high level of competency at, then lean into those and use AI to say, well, what jobs would be really, really good? Because you can then look at the job and say to yourself, to what extent will it enable me to utilize as many of those strengths? Because if it does, the likelihood you're going to really enjoy that job. You're using the things that really give you energy.
Yeah. I'm really interested to try this approach of yours of using the two AI tools. Because one thing I have noticed, just as a point of interest, not that I favor a tool over. I started with ChatGPT, I guess, because I was familiar with that. I've been using it, but recently I have noticed that Claude does seem to be a bit sharper when it comes to writing. So if I was going to do anything to do with writing, I might choose to do it in Claude as well. And like today, even this morning, I was having a session with a person, and he's finished off the CV, and we now need to refine an elevator pitch for him, and he's kind of struggling to come up with what to do. So what I suggest is that we could take the CV. Here's the format for the elevator pitch. Let's pop it. You could pop it in there, see what comes out, and then of course, then we've got some words that we can play with, because I think that's I don't know about the rest of you, but the blank page is like a horror for me. So if I've got something in front of me, I can do a lot with it, and I've even used it then to help people map out like a networking strategy. So, I'm in this organization, what might be the best way for me to meet people that might help me to advance in my role? How do I make those connections? Maybe even craft my messages to reach out and make connections if I need to. So I think, to be fair, you can use this at every stage of the job search, really. It's just what you want it to do. And it's being specific in the prompt. Give it an expertise. You're an expert copywriter, you're an expert elevator pitch writer, you're an expert in this industry, and give it as much context as possible. It's going to define the quality of your output, and then tell it what sort of output you want it in. Do I want a table? Do I want bullet points, etc.? And you can also tell it short answer, because, of course, as you probably noticed, AI can just keep going and going and going, and that's supposed to help the answer be a little bit more concise.
Yeah. So a couple of questions coming, guys. One, I think, the first one from Michael. Do you have a view on how to use AI to write your LinkedIn profile? I mean, you referred a little bit to that, Dean, in your comments there. What do you think?
Well, there's probably a little bit of a risk factor with this, because we were talking about a CV where you might want to anonymize your data.
Yeah.
If you want AI to review your profile, then you've got to tell it who you are. But if you put your name in, it's going to find that. AI is searching for data that is already there in there, and your LinkedIn profile is in open space for anybody to look at 24/7. So one of the things that you can do is, if you are prepared to upload your own CV, is to put your CV in as a document, and then the link to your LinkedIn profile in the sort of the text box, and actually ask it, is my LinkedIn profile a good reflection of my CV? So that it'll start to find the gaps between the two. And I've done that, and that's quite an interesting thing to do. The other thing I think, which is probably slightly separate to the AI that Michael's asking about, is one of the recommendations I often give is that when you look at your LinkedIn profile, the skills box probably only comes up with 2 or 3. So as a recruiter, or a hiring manager, if I want to look at your full list of skills, I've got to click on it and sometimes, let's be honest, I might not be bothered to do it as a recruiter or hiring manager. So if you are applying for several jobs that all of the competencies are, there's 3 or 4 that are the top competencies, the skills, then I would make sure that you are showcasing those as the first 3 or 4, because then you're just getting that maximum opportunity that somebody's going to see the skills that you want them to see. Don't be lazy in just having them in a random order.
No, makes sense.
By all means, use AI to to say what's missing, or you could also use it to, if you think about your profile statement or the about me, you could use it in an anonymized way, because you can use it to help craft the words to give you a really good view of who I am, what I'm about, what I do. So there's a couple of different ways there.
Yeah, and I think you also, Michael's raised another question here. You can keep refining it, can't you? You can keep adding to it with prompts. So you're having a conversation with it. So like it says, from now on, suggest a better version of my question. And if I want to use this profile for LinkedIn, what would that look like? Or what should it look like? So I think you can keep refining it until you're happy with it.
I'd also say on that, sorry to jump in, I'd also say on that, challenge AI. So when it's making those recommendations, think clearly, well, is that really, going back to what I said right at the start, in absolute clarity over what I want the AI to do. Is that what I want AI to do? And then in the prompt say, no, I don't want that, I want this. But the prompts might help you, lead you to get to that point of what you want it to come out with, because you are, you're relying on what it's saying, and it says something, you think, no, that's not what I want. Well, what do I want? I want this. But by it coming up with that in the first place, you may not have led you to have that sort of clarity, and then say, no, this is what I want, and it will respond accordingly.
I mean, I would just say, just going back to the previous question, I'll be honest, I've never tried the exercise you have, Dean, where I've actually put the profile in. I use it as a continuation of the CV exercise. So we keep everything anonymous, but we might ask it to craft some headline statements, to pull in some key words that might apply to the roles I'm going to apply for. And one of the things I like to do with it is, I mean, to me, LinkedIn, what I always say to people is that we want this to be like a shop window. It's a reflection of you as a person who's got a set of skills, not just a set of skills, but a personality, some values, some strengths. We want to get that across. And I have a prompt that I get people to go away and have a think about, crafting this personal brand that we talk about. Like, who is the person that you want to come across as? What are the 3 things that you want people to associate with you? And then incorporating that information into the about section to personalize it. Just put in even something as simple as like a bit of a mission statement, or I had a client I work with, and we positioned him as a safe pair of hands. He worked in testing. And so just little things like that can really add some personality and some memorability to the about section, I think, particularly in LinkedIn. So, but again, I've kept it anonymous, so I've not actually put the LinkedIn in to do it that way. I just keep it all very anonymous. And like with the headlines, we might get it to give us, 2 or 3 examples, and then we can pick the words that we like out of them and kind of play with them and come up with something that way. So again, I think it's breaking the blank page-itis for people and helping them to organize their ideas. Because I think that's the thing, is you have a lot of ideas, but you're not quite sure sometimes how to get them across in a very clear and succinct and memorable, hooky kind of way, which is what you need, I think, in the social media space.
Yeah. The other thing that I think's worthwhile considering with LinkedIn is we've all got our profile pictures. I still see quite a lot of grey or the standard LinkedIn banners, and I think you can I've seen quite a few examples. In fact, our CEO at 1080, Liz, has got a really, really good banner where there's lots of icons and clues as to what Liz is all about. There's a tennis racket in there and things like that. So don't be limited by just thinking AI is something that you put a prompt into and you get a response. using things like Grok or Canva or more visual based AI to create a montage of things that you can use for your banner, that to me is another good use of AI.
Yeah,
Especially if you're not very good at the visual, put in a montage or not a nice looking visual together.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, I like that.
And talking of our CEO, Liz, she has asked a question which leads us on to our third question, which was we framed up as to if you didn't know what you wanted to do next, how could you use AI to give you some career direction? So, Dean, do you want to start with that one?
Cool. Well, I think, Liz has said in her question is reflect on your strengths. I think that's the key thing. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier about identifying what your core strengths are, what your high value energizers are, what are the things you really enjoy, and maybe reflecting on previous jobs and asking yourself, well, what were the aspects of those jobs that I really, really enjoyed the most? And almost coming up then with your hit list of strengths and competencies, and asking AI, this is who I am. I'm strong in this area, this area, this area, and listing them. Say, what jobs would really enable me to deploy those strengths on a regular basis? Because quite often with a job search, and Chris and I have had conversations many a time about this with the job searches, you got the traditional route where you're looking for job adverts, but you're probably quite streamlined or blinkered in what jobs you're looking for. Or you can go the non-traditional route and look for organizations that you'd like to work for that may not necessarily have an opening at the moment. This is probably somewhere in between the two, is because you're starting to try and find out, well, what would I enjoy? What would be a fulfilling career pivot? Or you're asking AI to say, this is what I currently do, and these are the strengths. What roles are they transferable to? And you're just taking the blinkers off a little bit so that you're widening your search. And then, as I said earlier, you're asking yourself, to what extent will that role enable me to use my strengths?
Yeah. Chris, jump in. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with everything you said, Dean. I think it's partially a little bit what I said earlier. I think in terms of you can ask it to do an analysis on your strengths and what you're great at, and obviously point you in the direction. So it's really good at opening up options. But the other thing I was just thinking was that you could use it to help you plot. Okay, so here's the potential roles. How might I use a proactive approach in order to find individuals that are doing those roles where I could have some conversations? And here are the things that are most important to me about my work. What sort of companies in such and such a sector might align with the direction that I want to go, that I might want to research or have potential conversations or things like that. And I think even sometimes people, they're not even sure what their strengths are. Often we get a chance to use a great tool called Fuel 50, but we don't get to do that with every client. And sometimes we need to extract that. And so even just describing yourself as and it could be a bit lengthy, but just really giving it as much context and information as possible and saying, right, what might be my top 3 skills or strengths or whatever out of what I'm saying, how might I describe that skill or strength? Because sometimes people can't even put words around that. But I think you can definitely get it to give you some thoughts around direction. What might be the next steps? How might I go about doing that? Help me create a plan. Because I think that's the other thing people struggle sometimes with. Well, what do I actually do on a day-to-day basis to do a job search? But it's not just going online and looking at what's out there. It's how do we proactively do this and have conversations and stuff. So I think the AI can be very helpful in helping us develop a bit of a plan. And sometimes even just seeing those steps mapped out somewhere, because I always send them the output of the conversation afterwards. I think it can be really reassuring just to have a sense that you've got a plan, you've got a direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing, one last tip that I think is worthwhile considering on that, Chris, where you were talking about the career direction, is sometimes we are a little bit blinkered in thinking this is my next step. So the other thing that you can use AI with quite successfully is reverse engineering. So it's actually looking at, you know, for example, I might, if I was in an employed role, I might look at it and say, you know, I'm 55. I know that's hard to believe. I'm 55. I want to retire at this age. You know, 65. This is the job I want to retire from. Plot me a course from what I'm doing now to there. So you're almost, you're going from the, you know, the Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind, you know, the end in mind. You know, you're starting with that point, but then you're working backwards to know, well, I'd need to do this for this amount of time before I can do that role. And then you might find that the next step you thought you were going to take might differ to the jobs you've been looking for.
Yeah. They're a really good way to test your assumptions as well, I think.
Yeah, we're out of time, guys. So as usual, top tips to leave with. So let's wrap this one up. Chris, do you want to go first?
Gosh, okay. So firstly, I think the power is in the prompt. So you obviously want to ensure that that prompt is as clear as possible. So very, you know, expertise, because that's what's going to help the AI know what sort of, you know, what knowledge and expertise to draw from. The context, give it as much context as you reasonably can. And you know, be clear on, well, what kind of output am I looking for? Is it a table? Is it a bullet point? Is it a plan? You know, what am I looking for there? And I think the other thing I'd say is be brave and just experiment. There's a lot of people that I work with that have never really even played with AI. I can think of one client in particular. He was in insurance industry, and he'd never even really touched it, and he was amazed at what we were able to do. And I'm happy to say that he found a role a few weeks later. So give it a go, and don't be afraid to try a few different tools. Be mindful of anonymizing your data, and I'd say just be brave, but do always sense check it so that it sounds like you and it's not just coming, you know, regurgitated from a machine.
Good tip. And briefly, Mr. Johnson, briefly.
Be authentic. Use AI as a partner, not as the gospel. Absolute clarity over, you know, what is it you're actually asking it to do. Don't rely on one, in the same way as, you know, we've now got this verb to Google something, yet there was Yahoo, AOL, there's DuckDuckGo, there's all sorts of search engines out there, but we associate it with one. Don't limit yourself to one. Try different ones. Don't assume that because you've used one once, that it's going to be right. Think about, what is it I'm actually trying to do, and have several tools and use the right one for the right job. You know, that whole, if you only have a hammer, you treat every problem like a nail. So make sure you've got lots of tools in your toolkit.
Good tip. Thank you. Thank you both for your top tips. I'm sorry that I am cutting you off in your prime, because it is now 33 minutes past, so we have gone over. Just want to advertise our next session in April, where we're going to invite some candidates to share their top tips around real life job search stories. So please join us if you can on that date. And thank you again to Dean and to Chris for an informative session. Thanks very much.
Thank you for asking us.
Thank you.
Yep.